Welcome to the Tuesday Tonic. I am Pat Utomi. The Freedom Convoy that we're planning to bring 7.2 million Nigerians into Abuja to occupy it until freedom goes back to the Nigerian people is motivated by a troubling, a deep crisis of elite. I mean, there are those who, I think, of it as a Tinubu problem, but it's much more than that, much worse. He may be a stimulant in some ways, but the crisis is deeper and much worse. And if we don't halt it, there will be no future, I can assure you. Now, Pastor Bakare, in enumerating some of the sources of that crisis as a Tinubu problem, has talked about state capture, which I've talked very often about. Has talked about judicial capture, maybe not so much about judicial capture, but the completely useless 10th National Assembly that we have. And he has talked about a push for one-man rule, a domination of society by a strong man. Those are symptoms. There's such a much deeper crisis of elite. If we go back to the 1950s when elite bargains necessitated a federal structure, you saw young people who were committed to long-term goals for their country work out an arrangement. That's why the federal structure remains the only way that makes sense in Nigeria, a true federal structure. Military rule would destroy that. But as you can see, the civilians have not done enough to reverse that, because they see that as an elite they can profit from it, from the rent that it gives them. A long-term good of the Nigerian people doesn't seem to quite strike them when they get this opportunity to take care of themselves. And this is really the Nigerian tragedy. And so part of what this whole movement is about, and this is why we don't just march into Abuja, it will take 1 or 2 weeks of educating people where they live about how a country can care for everybody, how a country can be led by the right kinds of people, not be a criminal enterprise, how a country can develop a strategy for national growth that will make us not just be like our peers, but surpass them. Our peers all left us behind. Because the story of Nigeria and Indonesia is a classic example. But almost all of our peers left us long, long ago, far behind, because of a crisis of elite. How do we correct this crisis of elite? That's why we're marching on Abuja. And it's going to be a huge march. I mean, let us just look at the troubles that face us regarding an ineffectual National Assembly. Mr. Bakare did a good job of dealing with that. Let us look at what judicial capture has done to us. Let us look at how a failing media, let's not pretend, Nigerian media has been a terrible failure. They made an effort, some of them, but they're captured easily. Poverty has reached everybody. So those who have the strings pay of journalists, and our country can get the kind of robust discussion it got when we were in our teens and early 20s and functioned as reporters in that country. The real problem in Nigeria is that in the elite struggle to get a piece of the action for their own survival, they forgot the people, the Nigerian people. People without whom justice, the only way they can deal with things is to turn to violence. And violence has made it very difficult to produce. And then worse still, the elite are so obsessed with their self-surviving that economic policy is all about stabilization, and nothing about real growth. You don't grow an economy by the kinds of things we're doing. Those stabilize you, give impressions that things have turned around, but in the end, you're all dressed up with nowhere to go. So it's time to change all of this. Let's continue. We'll talk about this some more next week. And by December, as a country, we'll be ready for change, ready for a new kind of Nigeria. And I assure you, Nigeria will rise up again.